Scene 1. Cold open hook.
What if everything you've been taught about negotiation is wrong? What if the advice you've heard your entire life, meet in the middle, compromise, split the difference, was actually costing you better opportunities, better relationships, and better outcomes? What if compromising could actually make both sides lose? Most people believe the perfect negotiation ends the same way. Each person gives up a little. Each person walks away satisfied. Everyone meets somewhere in the middle. It sounds fair. It sounds reasonable. It sounds like common sense. But sometimes, the middle is the worst place to meet. Because compromise often ignores what people truly need. It solves the numbers, but not the emotions. This idea didn't come from a business school or a sales seminar. It came from one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Former FBI hostage negotiator, Chris Voss. A man whose conversations weren't about contracts. They were about lives. Every word mattered. Every pause mattered. Every decision could mean life or death. Chris Voss didn't negotiate with ordinary people.
He negotiated with terrorists, kidnappers, armed robbers, violent criminals, people under extreme pressure, people with nothing left to lose. No business deal, no legal contract, no financial incentive, just raw human emotion. Most negotiation experts believe logic wins. Present better facts. Offer stronger arguments. Show more evidence. Surely people would make rational decisions. Right? Wrong. Because human beings rarely decide with logic alone. They decide with emotion first and justify it with logic later. Think about the biggest decisions you've made. Choosing a career, buying a house, starting a business, falling in love. Did you rely only on numbers? Only on facts? Only on spreadsheets? Probably not. Because emotions influence every important decision we make. Fear, trust, hope, pride, security, belonging. These invisible forces shape every conversation. Negotiation isn't just about million-dollar business deals. It's everywhere. When parents talk to their children, when couples solve disagreements, when employees ask for raises, when entrepreneurs close clients, when friends make plans.
Every conversation is a negotiation, and every negotiation is driven by human psychology. Most people think great negotiators talk more, speak louder, argue better, convince faster. But Chris Voss discovered the exact opposite. The strongest negotiator is often the quietest person in the room, the one asking thoughtful questions, the one paying close attention, because people reveal everything when they feel heard. Winning isn't about overpowering someone. It isn't about manipulation. It isn't about forcing agreement. Real negotiation is about connection, understanding, trust, influence.
The best negotiators don't control people. They understand them. What if everything you've been taught about negotiation is wrong? What if compromising could actually make both sides lose? Most people believe the best deal is one where everyone meets in the middle. But Chris Voss discovered the middle isn't always the smartest place to meet, because people don't make decisions with logic. They make them with emotion. So what if the secret to winning every negotiation isn't talking more, but listening better? In the next lesson, we'll uncover the biggest misconception about negotiation. One simple belief that keeps millions of people from getting what they truly want, and why splitting the difference is rarely the best answer.
Scene 2, the biggest myth about negotiation.
What if the person sitting across from you doesn't actually want a fair deal? What if? More than money? More than winning? More than proving they're right? They simply want to feel understood. For years, we've been told that the best negotiation ends with compromise. You give up a little. They give up a little. And everyone walks away happy. It sounds reasonable. It sounds balanced. It sounds fair. But Chris Voss argues that this mindset often creates poor outcomes. Because when both sides simply split the difference, neither side gets what they truly need. Both leave feeling they sacrificed something important. One of the biggest mistakes in negotiation is arguing over positions. A position is what someone says they want. I need a higher salary. I won't pay more than this price. I need this project completed today. These are positions. But beneath every position lies an interest, a fear, a need, an emotion. Great negotiators don't stop at the surface. They dig deeper.
Imagine a customer demanding a discount. At first glance, it looks like they're only focused on price. But what if the real concern isn't money? What if they're worried about making a bad decision? What if they fear being taken advantage of? What if they simply need reassurance? The argument isn't about price. It's about confidence, trust, and security. Every person carries invisible emotions into a conversation. Stress, fear, pride, hope, frustration. These emotions shape how they listen, how they respond, and ultimately, how they decide. Before people accept your ideas, they want to know that you understand theirs. Many negotiators believe better facts win arguments, more evidence, better presentations, stronger logic. But have you ever tried proving someone wrong, only to watch them become even more defensive? That's because facts rarely change emotions, and emotions drive decisions. Logic simply just helps justify them afterward. Great negotiators don't rush to persuade. They slow down. They listen. They absorb. They ask thoughtful questions. Instead of preparing their next argument, they try to understand the other person's role. Because understanding creates influence, and influence creates better agreements. Whether you're asking for a raise, closing a business deal, resolving a family disagreement, or convincing a child to do homework, the same principle applies. People don't want to feel defeated. They don't want to feel ignored. They don't want to feel dismissed. They want to feel respected, valued, and understood. Winning a negotiation isn't about proving you're smart. It's not about speaking loudly or forcing someone to agree.
True success comes when both sides leave the conversation feeling heard, feeling respected, feeling understood. Because people are far more willing to cooperate when they believe you genuinely understand them. Think about your last disagreement. Were you trying to understand, or were you trying to win? Were you listening, or simply waiting for your turn to speak? The answer may explain why the conversation ended the way it did. Most negotiations fail because people argue over positions. Great negotiators uncover emotions. They recognize the fears behind the words, the needs behind the demands, and the feelings behind the facts. Because in every negotiation, people may talk with logic, but they decide with emotion.
In the next lesson, you'll discover the first powerful tool Chris Voss used in life or death hostage negotiations. A skill so effective it can instantly lower tension, build trust, and make almost anyone more willing to work with you. It's called tactical empathy. Scene 3. Tactical empathy. People don't need agreement first. They need understanding. Think about the last time someone truly listened to you. Not to interrupt, not to judge, not to prepare their next response, but simply to understand. How did it make you feel? Respected, valued, safe. That feeling is the foundation of every successful negotiation. Chris Voss calls it tactical empathy. At first, the word empathy may sound soft, emotional, passive, but tactical empathy is none of those things. It is a deliberate skill, a strategic way of understanding another person's emotions without surrendering your own position. Empathy is not weakness. It is one of the strongest tools of influence. What tactical empathy is not? Let's clear up a common misunderstanding. Empathy does not mean agreement. You can understand someone's fears without accepting their demands. You can recognize someone's frustration without admitting they're right. And empathy does not mean sympathy. Sympathy says, I feel sorry for you.
Empathy says, I understand how you feel. Understanding is not surrender. It's awareness. And awareness creates influence. Listen beyond the words. Most people hear words. Great negotiators hear emotions. They notice hesitation, tone of voice, long pauses, facial expressions, body language. Because sometimes the most important message is never spoken out loud. People often hide what matters most behind ordinary words. Every emotion tells a story. Imagine someone says, this deal's too expensive. Most negotiators immediately defend the price. They explain features, benefits, discounts. But a tactical empath asks a different question. What emotion is behind those words? Fear? Uncertainty? Pressure? Past disappointment? The real obstacle is rarely the words. It's the emotion behind them. The power of feeling heard. Have you ever noticed how quickly tension disappears when someone says, I understand? Not as an empty phrase, but with genuine attention. People naturally lower their defenses. Their voice softens. Their thinking becomes clearer. Because feeling understood creates psychological safety. Why this works? Our brains are constantly asking one silent question. Am I being heard? When the answer is no, we argue harder. We defend ourselves. We resist.
But when the answer is yes, we become open, flexible, collaborative. Understanding reduces resistance and opens the door to cooperation. Tactical empathy isn't only for hostage negotiations. Imagine using it with your spouse, your children, your co-workers, your customers, your friends. Instead of rushing to solve problems, you first acknowledge feelings. You make people feel seen, heard, respected. Relationships improve not because you win more arguments, but because people trust you more. Ask yourself, when someone speaks to me, am I truly listening? Or am I simply waiting for my turn to talk? Do I hear their words, or do I recognize their emotions? The answer reveals the quality of every conversation you have. Chris Voss didn't build trust by making bitter arguments. He built trust by making people feel understood. Only then did real negotiation begin. Because when emotions calm down, logic finally has a chance to be heard.
Tactical empathy is simple, but incredibly powerful.
Listen deeply. Identify emotions. Acknowledge what people feel. And make them feel heard. Because people don't need agreement first. They need understanding. And understanding is where every successful negotiation begins. In the next lesson, you'll discover one of Chris Voss's simplest yet most powerful communication techniques. A method so subtle, most people don't even realize it's happening. Yet it encourages others to reveal more information without pressure. It's called mirroring. Scene 4. The power of mirroring. What if one of the most powerful negotiation techniques required you to say almost nothing? No clever argument, no persuasive speech, no pressure, just a few carefully chosen words. Words the other person already said. The FBI's secret listening technique. Chris Voss calls this technique mirroring. It's incredibly simple. When someone says something important, repeat the last 1 to 3 words they just said. Then stop talking. Stay silent.
and let them continue. That silence is where the magic happens. Why mirroring works. Human beings naturally want to explain themselves. When they hear their own words repeated, their brain assumes they want to understand me. So they keep talking. They clarify. They expand. They reveal information they never planned to share. The more people speak, the more they reveal what truly matters to them. A simple demonstration. Imagine you're negotiating the price of a product. The customer says, "I don't think this price works." Most people immediately defend the price. They explain the quality, the features, the value. They start selling. Chris Voss recommends something very different. Simply respond, "This price doesn't work," then remain silent. What happens next?
The customer might respond, "It's not that it's expensive. I just wasn't expecting to spend this much today." Or, "I'm comparing it with another offer." Or perhaps, "I need approval from my manager first." Notice what happened. Without asking a complicated question, you uncovered the real issue. The problem was never just the price. People rarely tell you everything immediately. Sometimes they don't even understand their own concerns. They speak in general statements, vague objections, emotional reactions. Mirroring gently encourages them to go deeper, to think more clearly, to explain themselves. And every new sentence gives you valuable insight. It feels natural, not manipulative. The beauty of mirroring is that it doesn't feel like an interrogation. You're not demanding answers. You're not applying pressure. You're simply showing curiosity. You're inviting the other person to keep talking. And people love talking when they feel someone is genuinely listening. Listening builds trust faster than convincing. Mirroring isn't limited to negotiations. Imagine your spouse says, "I'm just exhausted." Instead of giving advice, you softly ask, "You exhausted?" Suddenly, they open up. They explain what happened, how they feel, what they truly need. Sometimes, people don't need solutions first. They need space to express themselves. The client says, "We're not ready." Instead of arguing, mirror the statement. "Not ready?" The client may reveal budget concerns, internal politics, fear of change, or uncertainty. Now you're solving the real problem instead of the one you assumed. Mirroring only works if you're comfortable with silence. Many people panic. They rush to fill every pause. They keep talking. Great negotiators don't fear silence. They respect it. Because silence gives people time to think. And thinking creates honesty. Sometimes, the most powerful words in a negotiation are the ones you never say. Think about your own conversations. How often do you interrupt? How often do you assume? How often do you answer before fully understanding? The next time someone speaks, try mirroring their last few words. Then simply listen. You may be surprised by what they choose to tell you. Mirroring is one of the simplest yet most powerful communication tools. Repeat the last few words someone says. Pause. Stay curious. And let them continue. Because every sentence they speak brings you closer to understanding the person behind the words. In the next lesson, you'll learn another powerful FBI technique. One that instantly lowers emotional tension.
makes people feel validated, and transforms conflict into cooperation. It's called labeling emotions.
Scene 5. Labeling emotions. What if one simple sentence could instantly calm an angry person? Not by arguing, not by defending yourself, not by trying to prove you're right, but by simply putting their feelings into words. Chris Voss calls this technique labeling. It sounds almost too simple to work, yet it's one of the most powerful tools in negotiation psychology. Instead of reacting to someone's words, you acknowledge the emotion behind them. You give that emotion a name, because emotions lose their intensity when they are recognized. What is a label? A label is a gentle observation, not an accusation, not a judgment, not a conclusion. It's simply your best guess about what the other person might be feeling. You begin with phrases like, it sounds like, it seems like, it looks like. These words create safety. They invite correction instead of creating conflict. A real-life example. Imagine a client says, I've had bad experiences with companies like yours. Most people immediately become defensive. They explain. They justify. They promise they're different. But a skilled negotiator responds differently.
It sounds like you've been disappointed before. Now, something remarkable happens. The client begins to relax because instead of being challenged, they feel understood. Executed. Understanding lowers resistance. Brainstorm. Our brains are constantly scanning for danger. When we feel misunderstood, we become defensive. We argue harder. We protect ourselves. Pause. But when someone accurately identifies our emotions, our brain receives a different message. I'm safe. They're listening. They understand. Executed. The emotional temperature drops, and real communication begins. Naming emotions reduces their power. Think about moments when you've been stressed, anxious, frustrated, or overwhelmed. Pause. What happens when someone calmly says, it seems like you're carrying a lot right now? Suddenly, you feel lighter. Not because the problem disappeared, but because someone acknowledged it. Executed. Emotions become easier to manage once they're recognized. Building trust without agreement. Here's the beauty of labeling.
You don't have to agree. You don't have to apologize. You don't even have to solve the problem immediately. You simply recognize what the other person may be experiencing. That alone builds trust. People trust those who make them feel understood. Imagine your coworker says, "This project is impossible." Instead of saying, "No, it's not," try saying, "It seems like you're feeling overwhelmed." The conversation immediately changes. Instead of arguing, you're connecting. Instead of creating distance, you're building trust. People open up when they don't feel judged. Labeling ain't only for negotiations. Use it with your spouse,
your children, your friends, your customers, your employees. Someone says, "You never listen to me." Instead of defending yourself, you might say, "It sounds like you feel ignored." That one sentence can completely change the direction of the conversation. Labeling is not a script. It's not a trick. It's not manipulation.
It only works when you're genuinely trying to understand. People can sense authenticity, and they can sense when you're pretending. Real empathy cannot be faked. It must be felt. Think about someone in your life who often becomes emotional. The next time you speak with them, resist the urge to argue. Resist the urge to fix everything. Instead, try naming what they may be feeling. You may discover that understanding is more powerful than persuasion. Labeling emotions is one of the fastest ways to reduce tension, increase trust, and build meaningful conversations. Use simple phrases. It sounds like, it seems like, it looks like. Then allow the other person to respond. Because when people feel understood, they stop fighting to be heard. And that's when real negotiation begins. In the next lesson, you'll discover two simple words that every great negotiator hopes to hear. Not "you're right," but something far more powerful. That's right.
Scene 6. The magic words. That's right.
What if two simple words could completely change the outcome of a negotiation? Not "I agree." Not "I'm sorry." Not even "you're right." The most powerful words a negotiator can hear are "that's right." Most people think hearing "you're right" means they've won the conversation. But Chris Voss discovered something surprising. In many negotiations, "you're right" is often just a polite way to end the discussion. It doesn't always mean agreement. Sometimes it means, "I just want this conversation to be over. Let's move on. I'm tired of arguing." The words sound positive, but emotionally, the negotiation has already stopped. Instead of trying to prove you're right, your goal is much deeper. Help the other person feel completely understood. When that happens, something remarkable occurs. The other person naturally responds. That's right. Those two words mean, yes, you truly understand my situation. You understand what matters to me. Why "that's right" is so powerful. Every person wants to feel seen, not judged, not corrected, not defeated. When someone says "that's right," they're telling you, you understand my perspective. And when people feel understood, their defenses begin to disappear. Trust replaces tension. Curiosity replaces resistance. Cooperation replaces conflict. A simple example.
Imagine a customer says, "We've been burned by vendors before." Instead of immediately selling your product, you summarize what you've heard. It sounds like reliability matters more to you than price because you've experienced broken promises in the past. The customer smiles and quietly says, "That's right." At that moment, conversation changes. You're no longer opponents. You're solving a problem together. The difference between the two phrases? Listen carefully.
There's a huge difference. "You're right" means, "Fine, you win. Let's move on. I don't want to argue anymore." But "that's right" means, "Yes, you understand exactly what I'm feeling. You finally see my perspective." One ends conversations. The other opens them. Many people try to influence too early. They persuade, they explain, they defend, they convince. Chris Voss teaches the opposite. Understand first, influence second. People rarely accept your ideas until they believe you understand theirs. Imagine using this at home. Your spouse says, "You've been too busy lately." Instead of defending yourself, you reply, "It sounds like you've been feeling alone and you miss spending time together." They look at you and softly say, "That's right."
In that moment, the argument disappears because understanding has replaced misunderstanding. Human beings don't simply want solutions. They want recognition, validation, connection. When someone says, "That's right," they've mentally shifted. They now see you as someone who understands them. And people trust those who genuinely understand them. Think about your last disagreement. Were you trying to hear, "You're right," or were you helping the other person feel understood enough to say, "That's right"? One seeks victory. The other builds connection. Never chase "you're right." Instead, listen carefully. Summarize accurately. Acknowledge emotions. Reflect their perspective.
Until the other person naturally says, "That's right." Because those two simple words mean trust has been established and real negotiation can finally begin. In the next lesson, you'll learn one of the most surprising strategies in Chris Voss's playbook. Why the word "no" is often far more valuable than hearing "yes."
And why great negotiators never fear rejection.
Scene 7. The power of no.
What if hearing "no" was actually the best thing that could happen in a negotiation? Most people fear the word "no." They avoid it. They panic when they hear it. They'll assume the conversation is over. But Chris Voss discovered something completely different. Sometimes, no is where the real negotiation begins. Why we fear no? From childhood, we've been taught that yes is success. A job offer, a business deal, a promotion, a sale. Everyone celebrates yes, and everyone fears no.
But that fear often causes us to negotiate from a place of
Desperation. We rush. We over-explain. We make unnecessary concessions, simply to avoid hearing one small word. Chris Voss sees no very differently. To him, no isn't rejection. It's information. It's honesty. It's the beginning of clarity. Because when someone says no, they are finally telling you how they really feel. And honest conversations lead to better negotiations. No creates safety. Think about this. When someone says yes, they may still feel pressure. They may feel trapped. They may simply want the conversation to end. But when someone says no, they feel in control. They feel protected. They feel safe enough to continue talking. People are far more open once they know they have the freedom to say no. A different kind of question. Instead of asking, do you have a few minutes to talk? Try asking, is now a bad time to talk? Most people naturally reply, no. Actually, I have a few minutes. By giving them permission to say no, you've given them a sense of control. And control builds comfort. The psychology behind it. Human beings value autonomy. We want to feel that we're making our own choices.
Not being forced into someone else's agenda. The word no protects that freedom. It creates boundaries. It reduces pressure. It lowers emotional resistance. When people feel free to say no, they're often more willing to say yes later. Imagine you're discussing a proposal with a client. Instead of asking, does this proposal look good to you? You ask, would it be ridiculous to explore this solution together? The client smiles. No, it wouldn't be ridiculous. The conversation continues without pressure. The word no didn't stop the negotiation. It opened the door. Many negotiations fail because people quit after hearing no. They assume the opportunity is gone. The relationship is over. The answer is final. But experienced negotiators know better. Every no contains valuable information. Why are they saying no? What concern remains? What fear hasn't been addressed? The answer isn't hidden behind yes. It's hidden behind no. Imagine your child refuses to do homework. Instead of saying, will you do it now? You ask, would it be a bad idea to finish it before dinner? You shifted the emotional dynamic. Instead of feeling controlled, they feel included in the decision. The conversation becomes cooperative instead of confrontational. Think about how you react when someone tells you no. Do you immediately feel rejected? Do you become defensive? Or do you become curious? The best negotiators don't fear no. They learn from it. Because every no brings them one step closer to the real conversation. Because no creates safety. It creates honesty. It creates clarity. And it creates trust. Never fear hearing no. Welcome it. Explore it. Understand it. Because the word no
Isn't the end of the negotiation. It's often the very beginning. In the next lesson, you'll discover one of the FBI's most effective questioning techniques. Questions so powerful, they make the other person solve your problem for you. Without pressure. Without conflict. Those are called calibrated questions.
Scene 8. Calibrated questions.
What if the most powerful negotiators didn't give the best answers? What if
They simply asked better questions, 'cause one well-timed question can accomplish more than 10 convincing arguments. Chris Voss calls them calibrated questions. They're not ordinary questions. They are carefully designed to make the other person think, to lower resistance, and to invite collaboration. Instead of forcing people towards your solution, you guide them to discover it themselves. Most people respond to conflict by defending their position. They explain, they persuade, they argue, but every argument creates another argument. Every demand creates resistance. Every command invites opposition. Questions do something completely different. They create curiosity. They encourage thinking. They invite cooperation. Chris Voss recommends beginning many questions with just 2 words: how and what. Notice what's missing. No accusations.
No pressure. No blame. Just an invitation to solve a problem together. Imagine a client says, "This is my final price." Many people immediately argue, or they reluctantly accept. Chris Voss suggests another approach. Calmly ask, "How am I supposed to do that?" Now something interesting happens. The client begins thinking about your situation, your challenges, your chapins. Instead of defending yourself, you've invited them to become part of the solution. Imagine someone insists, "This deadline cannot change." Rather than arguing, ask, "What makes this deadline so important?" Suddenly, new information appears. Perhaps there's an important meeting, a customer expectation, a hidden concern, or maybe the deadline isn't as fixed as it first seemed. Good questions uncover hidden opportunities. Arguments create opponents. Questions create partners. Because questions communicate respect. They say, "Your opinion matters. Help me understand. Let's solve this together." People support solutions. They help create the illusion of control. One of the most fascinating discoveries in negotiation is that people value control. They want to feel that they're making the decision. Calibrated questions provide exactly that. You're not telling them what to do. You're asking for their thinking, their ideas, their perspective. The conversation becomes collaborative instead of competitive.
Imagine your child refuses to clean their room. Instead of saying, "Go clean it now," you ask, "How can we get your room organized before dinner?" Or imagine a coworker misses a deadline. Instead of blaming them, ask, "What got in the way? How can we prevent this next time?" The focus shifts from blame to solutions. The best leaders are rarely the loudest voices in the room. They're the ones asking thoughtful questions. Questions that inspire thinking. Questions that unlock creativity. Questions that build trust. Leadership isn't about having every answer. It's about asking the questions that lead everyone toward better answers. Think about your next difficult conversation. Before giving advice, before defending yourself, before trying to persuade, ask yourself, what's one better question I could ask? Because the quality of your questions often determines the quality of your relationships.
Use calibrated questions. Begin with how and what. Invite people to think. Invite people to explain. Invite people to collaborate. Not because questions are softer, but because they're smarter. The best negotiators don't force answers. They ask questions that make everyone want to find the answer together. In the next lesson, you'll discover another surprising principle from Chris Voss. Why the greatest negotiators never try to control people directly, yet often end up guiding the entire conversation. It's the powerful illusion of control.
Scene 9. The illusion of control. Hook, what if the strongest person in a negotiation isn't the one who speaks the most? Isn't the one who argues the hardest? Or the one with the loudest voice? What if true influence comes from making the other person believe they're the one in control? The illusion of control. One of Chris Voss's most powerful discoveries is this: people don't like being controlled. They want choices. They want autonomy. They want to believe their decisions are their own. The moment someone feels pressured, their defenses rise. They become cautious. They resist. Pressure creates resistance. Freedom creates cooperation. Why control matters. Human beings have a deep psychological need to feel in charge of their lives. Whether it's choosing a restaurant, negotiating a salary, buying a house, or making a business decision. No one enjoys feeling trapped or manipulated. The more someone feels forced, the less likely they are to agree. Guide, don't push. Most inexperienced negotiators try to control every part of the conversation. They dominate, they interrupt, they persuade, they overwhelm with facts. Great negotiators take the opposite approach. They guide, they listen, they ask thoughtful questions, and they allow the other person to arrive at the conclusion themselves. People trust ideas more when they believe those ideas are their own. A business example. Imagine you're negotiating with a client. You could say, you need to choose our solution because it's the best. That creates pressure, and pressure creates resistance. Instead, you ask, how do you see this solution helping your team? What outcome would make this successful for you? Now the client begins explaining their own reasons for moving forward. You didn't force the decision. You guided the thinking. The art of letting others solve the problem. One of the greatest mistakes in negotiation is trying to solve every problem yourself. Instead, invite the other person into the solution. Ask, how can we make this work? What would need to happen for this to feel fair? Suddenly, the conversation shifts. You're no longer opponents. You're teammates. The best solutions are often created together. Beyond negotiation, this principle works everywhere. In leadership, in parenting, in friendships, and in marriage. Imagine your child refuses to study. Instead of saying, go study now, ask, how do you want to prepare for tomorrow's test? Now they're involved. They're thinking. They're taking ownership. Ownership creates commitment. Leadership without dominance. The greatest leaders don't control every decision. They create environments where people willingly contribute. They encourage ideas. They ask questions. They empower others. Their authority comes not from fear, but from trust. Influence grows when people feel respected. The hidden strength of humility. It may seem counterintuitive, but stepping back
can move you forward. When you stop trying to control every outcome, people begin participating more openly. They share ideas. They solve problems. They commit to solutions. Real power isn't controlling people. It's creating the conditions where they choose to move with you. Reflection. Think about your last difficult conversation. Were you trying to win? Or were you trying to understand? Were you controlling or guiding? Sometimes the fastest way to influence someone is to stop trying to control. Core message. People want control. Respect that need. Ask thoughtful questions. Listen carefully. Invite collaboration. Allow others to participate in the solution. Because the best negotiator don't dominate the conversation. They gently guide it.
And when people believe they chose the path themselves, they walk it with far greater commitment. In the next lesson, we'll uncover the final principle that ties everything together. How the world's best negotiators build trust, create connection, and reach agreements without intimidation, manipulation, or unnecessary compromise. Because the greatest victories aren't forced, they are earned.
Scene 10. Negotiation is everywhere.
What if I told you you've already negotiated several times today before you even realized it? Because negotiation isn't something that only happens inside boardrooms or during million-dollar business deals. It happens every single day.
Most people imagine negotiation as two executives sitting across a conference table discussing contracts, prices, or business partnerships. But Chris Voss reminds us negotiation is much bigger than that. It's a life skill, a communication skill, a relationship skill. Every meaningful conversation is a form of negotiation. Think about marriage. Who cooks dinner tonight? Where should the family go on vacation? How should money be spent? How do we divide responsibilities? These aren't arguments to win. They're conversations to understand. Healthy relationships aren't built by one person winning. They're built by both people feeling heard. Parents negotiate every day. Bedtime, homework, screen time, household rules. The goal isn't control. The goal is cooperation. Children respond better when they feel respected. Listening often teaches more than lecturing. Think about your workplace.
Asking for a raise, discussing a promotion, managing deadlines, resolving disagreements, leading a team. Every conversation requires influence, not force, not manipulation, but understanding. The people who advance fastest usually communicate best. Sales isn't convincing people. It's discovering what matters to them. The best sales professionals don't pressure customers. They ask questions. They listen. They uncover needs. Then they offer solutions. People don't buy products. They buy outcomes. They buy trust. Even friendships involve negotiation. Choosing where to meet, resolving misunderstandings, supporting one another, respecting boundaries. Strong friendships survive not because people always agree,
but because they communicate with empathy. Respect keeps relationships stronger than being right. The greatest leaders rarely give endless orders. Instead, they inspire commitment. They create trust. They ask thoughtful questions. They make people feel valued. Their influence doesn't come from authority alone. It comes from connection. Leadership is negotiation with purpose.
Whenever you speak with someone, you're not only exchanging information, you're also shaping relationships, building trust, reducing uncertainty, creating understanding. Every conversation leaves an emotional impression. People may forget your exact words, but they'll remember how you made them feel. That's why emotional intelligence is one of the greatest negotiation skills. You don't need to wear a suit or sit across a polished boardroom table to become a great negotiator. You simply need to become a better listener, a calmer communicator, a more curious person. Every interaction is an opportunity to build trust, solve problems, and strengthen relationships. The skills you learn in negotiation can improve every area of your life. Think about your conversations today with your family, your coworkers, your clients, your friends. Were you trying to be understood, or were you also trying to understand? Because every conversation is shaping your future relationships. Negotiation isn't a business skill. It's a life skill. You negotiate in marriage, in parenting, in sales, in friendships, in your career, and in leadership. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every interaction is an opportunity. Master the way you communicate, and you'll transform the way you live. In our final lesson, we'll bring together every principle from this book and discover why the world's greatest negotiators don't win by overpowering people. They win creating trust, understanding, and lasting influence. Because the best deal is one that strengthens the relationship.
Scene 11. Final transformation. What separates an average negotiator from a truly exceptional one? Isn't intelligence, isn't experience, and it certainly isn't the ability to argue louder. The world's greatest negotiators understand one simple truth. People rarely make decisions with logic alone. They make them through emotion. Many people walk into conversations prepared to defend their position, armed with facts, statistics, evidence. But Chris Voss discovered something remarkable during years of negotiating with hostage takers and high-stakes criminals. Facts may inform people, but emotions move people. The greatest negotiators don't try to control the conversation. They manage the emotional atmosphere surrounding it. They lower tension. They create safety. And they make honest communication possible. Most people chase agreement. They want to hear, yes, I agree. Let's do it. But agreement without trust is fragile. It can disappear the moment pressure returns. Trust comes first. Agreement follows naturally. Because people commit more deeply when they feel respected. Throughout this journey, we've learned that listening is far more than remaining silent. Real listening means noticing emotions, understanding fears, discovering motivations, and making people feel heard. When people feel understood,
their defenses begin to fade. Conversations become calmer. Ideas flow more freely. Listening is not passive. It is one of the strongest forms of influence, from opposition to partnership. Think about every principle in this book: tactical empathy, mirroring, labeling emotions, seeking "that's right," welcoming "no," asking calibrated questions, creating the illusion of control. Each technique has the same purpose: not to defeat the other person, but to remove the invisible barriers between you. The goal isn't to create winners and losers. The goal is to create partners. Beyond the negotiation table, these lessons don't end when the meeting is over. They follow you home, into your marriage, your friendships, your workplace, your leadership, and every relationship you build. Because every meaningful relationship depends on communication, trust, and mutual understanding. The better you negotiate, the better you connect with people.
Perhaps the greatest lesson of all is that winning doesn't always mean getting everything you wanted. Real success is different. It's finding solutions that people willingly support because they feel respected throughout the process. The strongest agreements are never forced. They are freely chosen. The next time you enter a difficult conversation, ask yourself, am I trying to win the argument? Understand the person. Am I trying to control or connect? Single shift in mindset can transform every conversation you have.
The greatest negotiators don't control conversations. They guide emotions. They don't force agreement. They earn trust. They don't speak to impress. They listen to understand. Because when negotiation isn't about getting your way, it's about creating an environment where the other person feels safe enough to work with you. Understanding creates trust. Trust creates cooperation. And cooperation creates agreements that last. So the next time life places you in a negotiation, whether it's with a client, a colleague, a loved one, or even yourself, remember this timeless lesson. The best deal isn't built through pressure. It isn't built through manipulation. And it isn't built by simply meeting in the middle. The best deal isn't built through understanding. Because when people truly feel heard, they don't just reach agreements. They build lasting relationships. And that's the real art of negotiation.